This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Consider this question of being, Seinsfrage, as Heidegger called it, and to look at the history of it in German thought, because it doesn't come out of nowhere. Heidegger starts to talk about the question of being. There's already a whole history. Famously, of course, in Fichte and in Hegel, of course, the idea that being and nothing are the same, because he has an abstract concept of being. But there has also been an undercurrent of a more concrete sense of existence, not just beginning with the response to Hegel and Kierkegaard, but going back to Eckhart, really. So I think so in German thought we could say, and we looked at that when we discussed the strict concept of matter. I think with Eckhart's idea of the Funklein in der Seele, the spark, the divine spark in the soul, there is a notion of radical individuality, which, well, again, itself, as we said already, has its roots in Avicenna, maybe also in Scotus, so there's all, of course, history to be written there. But there is an idea, and a Thomistic essay as well. Eckhart was a Dominican, after all. Yeah. So there is a notion of existence that's already there in German philosophy. It comes out from the Middle Ages, has a whole history, and plays a role in the different iterations that we get through from Eckhart to the present day. And it seems to me that asking this question of being is something that we have to do. We have to do it if we are to think about it. So you can't just put it out there as a topic and so as an object of study. You can do that to a certain extent, but there comes a point where you have to ask this question yourself. Heidegger made this point very clear. Exposition der Seinsfrage, the exposition of the question of being, means two things. It means to explain and deal with the question of being, but also to expose yourself to being as a question. And exposing yourself to being as a question, that could be taken as a kind of existentialist theme. Is of course also present very clearly in Bloch, to whom I always refer, especially in the 1918 version of The Spirit of Utopia, where he has this passage about the world as a question, and not just any question, but an inconstruable or inconstructible question, a question that cannot be formulated with respect to a potential answer yet. And so you see him struggling there, in a way, with the same kind of problematic. In Bloch's philosophy, when he takes that from German idealism, there are always these two poles, and they have to do with the topic that we're talking about, what and that. What something is, that something is. Aristotelian hoti and dioti, and that's also a Schellingian idea, of course, so Schelling emphasizes that too. The that of things is the drive, is the urge, is will, intensity. The what of things is their shape, their quality, their nature, their essence. What is the relation between these two things? And do they form an adequate analysis of being, the concept or idea of being? That is one big question that we will be looking at. It's a very big question. For Heidegger, this analysis of essence and existence is not enough. It doesn't cut it. going to have to see how these concepts are related. A very basic idea there that I want you to bear in mind is, and that is Aquinas' idea, is that being, when we talk about being, about what there is, the isness of things, that this being pertains to everything, because everything is. And it therefore is a concept, if you can call it a concept, and we'll say more about that, that has maximum extension. Because everything, there's nothing that doesn't fall under it, because it can be said of everything. For Hegel, this means that, as any concept, maximum extension means minimal intention. So it is empty, it is the emptiest, everything falls under it, and therefore it's the emptiest concept. And that's why he says, in the dialectic, it is as good as nothing. For Aquinas, this is different. For Aquinas, and in the Thomist tradition, certainly the Thomist tradition has developed in Germany, with Briswara, of course, we read it in the time ago, as one of the key figures there, but there are others as well. We'll look at those. For this Thomist tradition, the concept of being has maximum extension, but also maximum intention. So it is both the most general notion that there is, and it is the most concrete notion that there is. It is not an abstract concept, but it is something that denotes the very heart of anything there is, namely that it is. And that's a different way of thinking. That's a way of thinking that then, as we will discover hopefully, leads to a kind of analogical understanding of being. Analogia antis, the analogy of being, as a way of thinking or expressing what it means to be. But that will, I mean, these are just some preliminary thoughts. This theory of the analogy of being has a theological provenance, and is rooted in the idea that God is unknowable, but yet we can think or speak about God. We can have maybe not a rational, in the sense of a univocal rationality, but we can have a rational discourse of God in an analogical sense. So we can predicate things truly of God, as long as we realize that we are predicating them analogically, which means that, for example, if we say God is love, then Aquinas would say, the Thomist tradition would say, yes, that's true, God is love. Analogically, we know what love is from our own experience, and that applies to God. But the way in which it applies to God is such that, although it is true that God is love, it is even more true that He isn't, because we don't know what that divine love would be. So we can speak truly of God as long as we realize that what we say is even to a greater extent not true as it is true of God. So God is good, God, all these things. And that's very, in a way, very clever, and it's more than that, but a very clever way of getting out around this problem of how can we think and predicate truly of God. In the Protestant tradition, this analogy of being was not accepted, and Karl Barth says that the analogy of being is the one reason why you can never be a Catholic. It is the work of the devil, he says. So, and that's another theme that's going to be in the background. What about this analogy of being? Is it the work of the devil? Or can we get around it? Oh, yeah. Come on.
Sorry, I'm late.
It's okay. Yeah, sit down. So that's the analogy of being. That is in a way one consequence of taking this essence-existence relation seriously, or taking that as a basic analysis of being.
Sorry to stop you here.
Yes. No.
Faith, I could understand the example of God and relate it to a lot of things. But to think about being, are we to say that we know or say our being? That's what we have preconceptual, that's Heidegger's have it, understanding of being. But we can't say affirmatively, being is like that. Is that the logical way? Is to say, we know from our own experience, we know the question of being without thinking about it, because it's a preconceptual thing. We have implicit and explicit understanding of it.
Yeah.
What to affirm or to say being is this and this is being could be not that. Is that right? Let's say that God is love.
Yeah.
He may not be. Can we say that? Right?
But you wouldn't say necessarily God is love, but he may not be. You say God is love, but he's more than that. He's that and more. So it's that in and beyond the kind of basic structure is God is in love, but also beyond, much more beyond it, something.
Yeah. He's always immeasurably more than what we can truly predicate of him. And so, although it is true to say that God is love, it is also true that he isn't. If we take that love to be, if we take love to be what we understand.
Oh, right. Because it's beyond me.
Yeah. So maybe I could say.
But how do we apply that sense to being this analogical way?
Yeah, how do we apply it to being? That's a good question. Yeah. So the question of being starts with Aristotle, in a way. Yeah? And Aristotle, I put that at the beginning of our introduction there. The question which was raised of old and is raised now and is always the subject of doubt, namely what being is just the question, what is substance? Now in the Greek it says what to be is, so he uses the infinitive form of the verb einai, so what is to be, and then he says this is just the question, what is a being, what is to on, so what is the entity, as we come from, that's an abstract noun, and on is not an abstract noun, it's concrete noun. So that is a key sentence in Aristotle's Metaphysics, in which Aristotle says, so the question, what is being, is really the question, what is the nature of the things that there are? If we ask what is being, we can say, okay, so what sort of things are there? There are tables, there are chairs, there are people, there are ideas, there's time, there's space, there are qualities, etc., etc. Science will have something to say about what is there. as Russell called it, the furniture of the world. You know, what is the furniture of the world? What is the stuff that makes up everything? That is the question of being. That's the question of being. And in a way, you could say that in Aristotle's metaphysics, this was, I think, if you want to put it in very simple terms, Heidegger's concrete criticism of metaphysics as ontology, is to say, in that sentence almost, you see the eclipsing of being happening. Because in that sentence, Aristotle says, the question what is being, thinking being, what is it? It is the question thinking substance. Or thinking to on, thinking the independent entity in its own right. Yeah? So in German, Aristotle says the question what is sein is just the question what is seinness. So, and you can't say that in English, then it becomes what is being is what is being.
Can you say that again in German?
So in German the question what is being, sein, yeah. For Aristotle says the question what is being, sein, is the question what is seinness.
Science.
Seinness.
Science.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that is.
Yeah.
That's how it's a participle. It's not an infinitive. So he moves from the infinitive to the participle. The infinitive being is a verb, or I don't know what it is. And then you can make it into a participle, so you can basically limit it, and then it becomes a scientist. In Latin, you can't even really do that. In Latin, you have esse as an infinitive. Yeah, and then you also have the participle form ens, which is scientist. But you also have entitas, which is an abstract noun. There's a difference between ens and entitas. It's the difference between Zayend and Zayendheit. Yeah.
Is that a word?
Well, it's a bit of a difficult word. You know how Heidegger coins it, but you can coin it by you can form it in a regular way. You just follow the rules of German. You can make an abstract noun out of a concrete noun by putting height behind it. So what I'm getting at is the English word entity, which we use to refer to things, is an abstract noun. Yeah? That we use to refer to concrete things. This is an entity. In German, you would then have to say, if you translate it literally, this is Seiendheit. You know, rather than this is Seinness. That's already a problem that begins to unfold, because how comes it that English has started to apply an abstract noun to concrete things?
Because being gets in everything.
Huh?
Being gets in everything.
Yeah.
That's the problem of talking about it.
Exactly, yeah. And the problem in English is even confounded, complicated by the fact that we have being as a gerund. So this word being is a very difficult word. And in a way, this is what Heidegger certainly thought, he was very, so for Heidegger, English culture is metaphysical ontotheology in the worst possible sense, because it glosses over this distinction, just as Aristotle glosses over. That's why the British all love Aristotle, you know, the gentleman, really. the very interesting thing about Alan White, and that's what we are going to latch onto, is the fact that he turns this problem of English, fully knowing, he wrote books on Schelling and Nietzsche, and fully knowing the discussion, he turns it into the great unexplored strength of English. He says, no, if we think about the question of being in a more radical way than the metaphysical tradition has done, with its analysis of existence versus essence, then we find out that this word being, precisely as taken as a continuant, so just like eating, I am eating, being, I am being, I'm doing being right now. So not as a gerund, not as a substantivized verb, but as a continuant. Then English has suddenly a potential that goes far beyond anything that the languages in which the metaphysical tradition has expressed itself, including German, can do. And this is really a big claim. It's a big claim because Alan White's teacher, Lorenz Puntel, and we'll talk about Puntel, we'll come to talk about him in detail, who was a student of Heidegger, who studied with Heidegger, feels that, or thinks, and he has we'll read a chapter from one of his books in which he gives a detailed analysis of this claim, claims that Heidegger correctly identified the true nature of the question of being, but because he couldn't find a way out of the problem that this question of how do you speak rationally about it presented, that he had to go into, as Puntel calls it, irrational, mystical, a poetic way of thinking that intimates or hints at something but loses itself in complete unintelligibility, which is a little bit of an old-fashioned thing to say now about Heidegger. But on the other hand, I think there is in a way a point to it. There's always, with Heidegger's Seinsdenken, there's always the question of why does it take the shape that it takes, and there is also a real question, which for me has always been a real question. That's why I wanted to take the opportunity to now start to investigate this. There's always, to me, also been the real question: is what the Thomist tradition is saying about being, is that really so Seinsvergessen, forgetful of being, as Heidegger claims? I don't think so. And maybe even the whole metaphysical tradition, when we read it against the grain, you can see that there is a thinking of being going on there in a way that Heidegger doesn't do justice to. And maybe this liberating notion of being, as Alan White tries to think about it, has something in store for us there as well. We go a bit fast now, yeah? So, but that's the idea, that we start to explore how the word being relates to essence and existence. That could be the...
essence and?
Existence.
Existence.
Existence, yeah. And going back to your question about analogy, once Aristotle has said this, the question of being is the question, what is a being? What does it mean to be a being? Then he proceeds on two levels. On the one level, he develops a theory of the categories. So he says, well, what can we say about beings? The beings that there are, and this is an unexplored assumption for Aristotle, the beings that truly exist are independent. What is a substance? This is the key term, hypokaimenon in Greek, which means the same as substance. It means that which stands underneath. Just a substance also has the soup, Latin for under, and stans from stand. And hypokaimenon is the same thing. So he uses it as a word that he makes. It's not a word in Greek, but he makes it. Substance. And what is substance? Substance is, as he says in the categories, which always felt categories 2b5, if you want to look it up. One of the key sentences in the philosophical tradition, I think, he says, by substance I mean an individually existing thing, such as an individual horse or man. So that he gives an example in this text about the logic of propositions or judgments, and he says, what is a substance? Well, it's like a horse or a man. Yeah? That is the prototypical example of a substance. Why? Because a horse or a man, an individual organism, is just its own thing. Aristotle says it doesn't need anything else to exist. Well, it needs a whole lot of things, of course, it needs to feed itself, etc., etc. When we talk about it, its being is not in anything else. And we become that's a big question whether that's even true. And this notion of substance, of course, has had a huge history and there are lots of problems with it, and we don't know what that. Whereas all the other categories of things that there are always exist in something else. So color is always the color of something. Any form of quality, any form of relation, any form of all the 10 categories, all the 9 other categories except for substance, they all adhere in something. Except for substance. We don't say that the horse is a horse of something else, or that the individual man is a human being of something else. They are what they are. And that's where the idea of substance sort of has its phenomenological location. Those things that do not adhere in others in order to be, but that exist in themselves. And then you can ask the question, Aristotle says, okay, so what is that which exists in itself? For example, if you were to say the human being in its phenomenological appearance is an effect of physical relations between atoms or whatever, then you might want to say, well, the real substance, real substances are the atoms or whatever sort of elementary particles you may have. That becomes then a question for almost, you might say, a regional metaphysics or a regional ontology to figure out with regards to particular things that in our field of appearance have a certain independence. We would then have to inquire, is that truly fundamental independence? Is that a truly fundamental independence, or is this particular thing somehow an effect of an underlying fundamental reality?
But mentally, we are also appearing only because of the surrounding people. Wasn't not true.
Yeah, that's, of course, yeah. And for Aristotle, that is, and that's, so this is where, yeah, that's true, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think it is true. Yeah. For Aristotle,
it's my experience.
Yeah, exactly. So Aristotle doesn't really work out how to think about relationality. It doesn't really. So the relations for Aristotle are always also in substances. The relation itself has no substantial being. So when person A and person B are related as a mother and daughter, then there isn't a relation mother-daughter in which the mother and the daughter participate. No, the relation between the mother and the daughter is such that from the side of the mother she's the mother, from the side of the daughter she's the daughter, but they are qualities that apply to these people, rather than that there is a separate entity, the relation.
So the mother is complete in herself.
Yeah.
Because to have a relation, you have to have some kind of lack or.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you would have to have some kind of.
So the substance is complete in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has relations, but these relations are just expressions of its qualities and how these qualities relate to other things. Yeah, but the substance is independent in itself.
And it's a very different relation than having, well, the relation with strangers, how they react, how one reacts to what they do to them, or I mean, I don't know how to say that, but I just on my own studio this weekend.
Yeah.
I was dependent on the people, and because of the other people, I felt really good. But that was only because of the other people. If they said wonderful things about my work, if they had said I hate this, then I would have been very different. So I'm dependent on the relations with.
Yeah.
Other people were not coming from my body, not the daughter or son. Or
Yeah, of course you need social relations to of course the whole social world. And Aristotle is not blind to those things. Aristotle is not blind to those things. But he does say that as far as we're talking about ontology, they are not. They do not have an independent existence. They inhere in you and in the others, rather than the other way around. But okay, we'll talk about that, because there's one big question: is how does in Aristotelian ontology, what is the place of relations? And that's a big question. Andrew Benjamin has just published a new book towards a relational ontology, in which he takes up this question. Tries to think about relations as themselves fundamental. And that's also something that in process philosophy has been done, right? That's really Whitehead's point, yeah? That relations are substantial rather than that they adhere in substances. It's rather the other way around. Yeah? Whether that is a logically coherent claim or not is a question that a lot of people would have ideas about. Theologically speaking, of course, even in Thomas Aquinas there is already a hint at a substantial notion of relations, namely in the Trinity. Because in the Trinity, so in the nature of God, there is God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, and they are purely defined in terms of each other, and yet they cannot be reduced. One of them cannot be reduced to the other two. So that is a beginning of a purely relational concept of being. We might say if you extend the idea, the Thomist idea of the nature of God, if you were to extend that to the rest of the world, then you would have the ground structure of a relational ontology.
So that means we are all one.
Then in a sense we're all one, yes.
Yeah.
But we are, of course, in a sense all one, but maybe in another sense also we're not. Yeah. So that's, right, yeah, exactly. And that's what, there's a whole lot to be said about that. Yeah. We're talking about the relation between the one and the many, and how to conceive of it. Yeah. Now, when Aristotle has made this move, I said he goes off on two levels. And what I mean by that is that on the one hand we have the theory of the categories, with substance as that which exists in itself, and the other categories as adhering in substance. And on the other hand, we have something that you might call the metaphysical constitution of substance. So what is substance? Well, first of all, substance is this structure of something that exists in itself and things that pertain to it. We might call that substance an attribute in the most general sense. But then there are other things as well, because there is a relation between actuality and potentiality. Actuality and potentiality. So there is, things can be in act and things can be potential. So not in act, they're not actual yet, but they might be actual. Aristotle uses the polarity of actuality and potentiality to think change, to explain how the substance can change and yet stay what it is. That's because it has certain possibilities that have not been actualized and that can be actualized. So all change is a relation between potentiality, or possibility, and actuality. This is all just basic introduction. The relation between potentiality and actuality is part of the nature of what it means to be a substance. Just as part of the nature of what it means to be a substance is to be an independent thing with attributes. But those are two different levels. There are two different, there is the categorical structure of reality, and there is the metaphysical structure of the individual being. And in that metaphysical structure of the individual being, we find potency and actuality as one polarity. We find matter and form as another polarity. Matter is the possibility to exist. You see this very closely related to the idea of actuality and potentiality. Form is the specific shape or nature or character that a being takes on. So matter and form are related, is a polarity within the nature of substance as well. When we think about substance, we always think about actuality and potentiality. We always think about matter and form. Later on, Aristotle doesn't do this, but the innovation that Aquinas brings in, based on Avicenna, is to say there is also a polarity between essence and existence. Or in Bloch's terms, that he takes from Schelling, what something is and that it is. These three polarities, actuality, potentiality, matter, form, existence, essence, have a lot in common, but they don't mean exactly the same thing. There's a real question, a theoretical question. Do you need all three? Are they the same? Could it be different? Yeah. So Puntel and White are new in the sense that they have a real theory about it, which we can investigate. We can say, okay, how do they see it? Does it make sense or not? So with Aristotle, we're now in a situation where we have these 10 categories, and we have these metaphysical polarities. And we have to ask the question, how are they related? That's a difficult question. We're not going to go into that now. We also have to ask the question, Aristotle asked this question himself, Aristotle adds another element, which is the genus-species relation, that all the things there are individuals of certain species, and species are species of a certain genus, and then there are several genera in the world. Aristotle asks the question, what is the relation between these different categories? We just look at the categories. And there he says, there is no highest category. Although you can say that colors and maybe textures, or sounds, they're qualities. So you can say that there are different kinds of qualities, and that there is also the category quality. And so you can say there are different kinds of relations, and there is the category relation. There are different kinds of substance, and there is the category substance. Now, can you also say there are different categories, and so there is the category category? No, you can't. So you can, that would be to say that being, Aristotle's very clever here, that would be to say that being is a category. That being is the highest genus, is the highest genus. So that what we can predicate we can say being of everything, because everything is, but that doesn't mean that the logic of being is the same as the logic of genus and species, or which is basically the form that the internal structure of the categories take. There are many kinds of relation, and there's one general, the category relation is well, they're all relations, so we can say relation of a different kind. We cannot say that of being. Being, because it means something else in all these cases. When we say being of substance, it means independently existing, potentiality, actuality, unity. When we say being of relation, it means inhering in. When we say of quality, it means something else, a different way of inhering in. So, whereas the structure applies within the categories of genus and species, it does not apply for the categories amongst themselves. And that means that being, because they all these categories are, that means that being is itself not a category, or is not the highest genus. And Aristotle then says being is predicated in many ways of everything that there is. And so he recognizes, really key insight, he recognizes that with respect to being, there is a fundamental analogy, you want to say. Yeah? There is a fundamental plurality in its meanings that you cannot get rid of. Of course, not everyone has agreed with this. You see how this is also complex. You see already with not with Avicenna, but with Duns Scotus, you see that he starts to say no. Being means the same. It's the same thing when you say it in every case. But that's because he has been able to already extract a different notion of being than one that Aristotle was working with, one that begins to move in the direction of existence. Spinoza also rejects this manifoldness in the way being is predicated. Today, of course, Deleuze is the greatest metaphysician of the 20th century who rejects who sticks with the uniformity of being. Being is said in the same way in each case. But for Aristotle, and initially he has good reasons, because we can see that in the structure of categoriality itself. We can say there is something strange going on with this notion of being. It doesn't follow, it generates the logic of categorical structure, but it doesn't follow that logic itself. It is beyond it in a certain way. That is just a mere observation in Aristotle. He says being is said in many different ways. It becomes the starting point for Thomas Aquinas' theory of the analogy of being. He then starts to work out that there is you can in a rational way talk about if you want to put it in technical terms, you can talk in a rational way about the relation between the categories when you see that they are analogical. It also becomes a starting point for for Heidegger, many centuries later, Heidegger reads this as a young boy, reads this statement. Brentano wrote a book about it, about the manifold meaning of being in Aristotle. And this question presents itself to Heidegger as an original question. So what then of the unity of these modes of being? Does that exist? Is it there? That was a question that Aristotle had already also asked. Yeah? But is there a unity in the modes of predication of being? The question presents itself to Heidegger, young Heidegger. You must have dramatized it a bit, I think, too. I don't know. But presents itself as a forceful question. So, if being is predicated in many different ways, then what is the unity of it? And that's what you can say, that's the Seinsfrage. That is the Seinsfrage. And he starts to interpret it as a question.
Sorry, what is that?
That's the Seinsfrage. That's the question of being. He interprets it as a question that poses itself to him. And he will try to, that's what he does in his philosophy, he clears away the rubble that he tries to clear away the rubble that is already present in the way Aristotle comes up here with this idea of manifold ways in which being is set. There is already that in it. So that is about analogy of being. That's where we get the question of the oneness of to be, of what is, formulated as a question of the analogical or not relation between the ways in which being is predicated in the categories. Heidegger will go one way. He will say we have to get rid of all of that. Thomas Aquinas says we can have a proper analysis of this unity of being in what he calls esse, to be, in the analogy of being. And Puntel and White have a third option. They don't have the analogy of being. They don't like it. They don't want it. They also don't have Heidegger's poetical way of thinking about being. They have something else. They think that by invoking, at least I think that's maybe more White than Puntel, by invoking the particular logic of the English word being, you can avoid both Heidegger's, you don't have to go down Heidegger's path and of an intuitive perception of being as beyond rationality, and you also don't have to go down the path of the analogy of being. And that means, we'll get to that later on, that means that you also don't have to go down the path of making a distinction between essence and existence, quite in the way in which Thomas Aquinas did it. Yeah, okay.
And that is actually a mystical theory about unity of being.
Yeah.
So, for example, in Arabic, you find he says in prayer, he says, Sami'Allah Muhammad, means when God hears whoever praises him. He said, that's not you saying it, that's God saying it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, true, yeah. Why? I mean, philosophically speaking, what lies behind it is the relation between essence and existence. But the way Thomas Aquinas thinks it, and he gets this from the Islamic philosophers and also from Neoplatonic thought, where he says, so if you take being as applying to everything, then it cannot be simply potential, because it is, and therefore being is actuality. Being is act of being. Actus essendi, it's the act of being. To be being, to be engaged in being. And this essay in itself, that's Thomas Aquinas' basic insight, is unlimited. It is purely unlimited being, active being. It only becomes limited in the finite being. And so Aquinas interprets essence, oneness, that which makes this particular being this rather than that. He interprets that as a limitation of the active being. In God, being is unlimited. That's why God is in everything. Everything is in God, but yet God is not the totality of things. It's more than that. Because limitation does not apply to God. The moment the active being limits itself, beings arise, and acts arises. And that is what the structure of finite being. So the structure of finite being is unlimited esse limiting itself. And this limitation, that is essence. That's why, according to Aquinas, we can say, so when we speak of the essence of something, the essence of a human being is to be in a particular way and not in another way. That's a limitation. For God, it doesn't apply. But of course, at a speculative level, that means that if you see that limitation, it's a limitation of being, of essence. That means that at a speculative level, we are all in God. And it is God itself. I am, you might say it that way, although I think the Catholic theologians would probably not agree with it, but you might say there is a thought in Aquinas that would say, I am God, limited to the essence of Johan Siebers in this case.
What's the essence of?
Of me in this case. Of me.
I'm sorry, I have such difficulties. I'm sorry, I interrupt you all the time.
No, that's fine.
This is fine.
So every individual thing is active being, limited according to its own nature. The unity of being is given with the fact that everything participates in this esse, in this being, the active being. The plurality in being is explained by the fact that everything has a different limitation. So invoking this idea of esse as unlimited existence, and then essence as limitation, allowed the early 20th century neo-Thomists, so like Gilson, to say, actually, this is a kind of existentialism. Because, Sartre had said, metaphysics is essence precedes existence, existentialism is existence, unformed, limitless possibility, freedom, precedes essence, how we limit ourselves. For the Thomists, they could easily pick that up and say, it's the same with Thomas Aquinas, because esse is what Sartre calls existence. That is unlimited and is prior to any limitation that's imposed on it, which is essence. Only, of course, in Thomism, it's God who's doing that, and in Aquinas, it's every individual human being who has this unformed, limitless freedom, is this unformed, limitless freedom, and the ways in which it projects itself in its life are the ways in which it limits itself and realizes particular possibilities rather than others. That's Sartre, yeah. But so Gilson says, well, the idea that existence precedes essence is the core of the Thomist metaphysics. And so Thomism is existentialism, and you can't also say that it forgets being, because what Heidegger meant with forgetfulness of being is precisely forgetting this unlimited self-giving active existence, which is the unconcealment, which is the escaped, the giving of being. Whether that is true or not Heidegger said, no, that's not what I mean.
The weird thing is that, if that's true, the unlimited act of being is limited itself in such a way, in such an essence that then wants to think the act of being, or
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
or at least we don't think that the tree is posed. The question of being is posed to the tree.
That's right. We don't say that, and it's certainly in Thomism, it is exactly like you say.
Yeah.
So Thomas would say, Aquinas would say, that the human being is the particular form of limitation which, through knowing, through thinking, can relate back to this totality.
Mm.
Everything that exists has this, the whole universe has the structure of what Aquinas calls exitus vegetus, going out, coming back, exire, to go out, to come back, exitus vegetus. There is this unlimited being, which limits itself, that becomes an entity, and the entity, this decays or whatever, or in some way comes back to the totality. In the human being, that happens through conscious taking up of your own existence. So I exist, I can, the human being, as far as we know, in distinction to the tree or the animal or the inanimated being, is aware of its existence and therefore can entertain a relation to the totality. And through thought and through reflection can come to realize the source of its being. And so in religion, as Bloch always says, religion, religare, tying back to, in religion we return to this origin. And so we are aware of a structure in being that is present everywhere. But we are the ones who know about it. That's why we are created in the theology, that this then becomes, that's why we are created in the image of God.
This is very much in line with Fichte's thinking, and the Wissenschaft, that the being is activity. We posit the self, posit the individual,
Yes, that's
empirical
right.
I,
Exactly.
and then the world,
Yeah.
and then expand the realm of freedom.
Yeah.
And it does create this, the not I, by the Aristotle,
Yeah.
by putting limitation on itself.
Yeah.
So prior to that, there is no limitation on it, and there are no limitations on it. It only allows itself to be limited
Exactly. Yeah.
through its activity,
Yeah.
and it doesn't start with consciousness, but it ends up with consciousness.
Yeah.
Because it's without Aristotle, without having reflection, there is no reflection actually,
Exactly.
which is consciousness.
Yeah.
So you have to have this limitation to have the
Yeah.
consciousness arises.
Yeah, and in Fichte that also becomes what he calls a Tathandlung. It's a material,
The act.
existential thing. It's something that an act, something that needs to be done. Yeah, it's not thought. It's
And there's this drive back, take you back from the limited world to the absolute.
yeah. Exactly, yeah. So you could say this is the reason why Fichte was, of course, accused of atheism, or if the Curie for the purity of the faith would look at Fichte, they would say, he secularizes the Thomist analysis. So that's what he does, and.
Schelling does the same.
And Schelling, of course, Schelling follows on that.
Yeah.
But what Schelling adds is the maybe, I don't know much about Fichte, but maybe a clearer understanding of the fact that this Tathandlung is an effect of the will, and that there is a relation between being and nothingness in it. Yeah? But even in Fichte, the Tathandlung is a result of spontaneity.
Yeah.
Yeah? And with the notion of spontaneity, of course, we get right to the heart of the Thomist analysis, because if esse is anything, it is act of being, it is fullness of being, it is, and that goes back to Plotinus actually. Plotinus says this one gives itself, is abundance. To be is to be abundant. To be is to be more than you are, to go out of yourself. That is, he says, Plotinus says it's literally. So this one in Plotinus does not, it doesn't stay with itself, and yet it stays with itself. It doesn't communicate, but it gives.
Is that, could you say that's the polar opposite of someone like Bergman, who the beginning is almost, it's like a not having, isn't it? It's not being abundant. That makes it go outside itself.
Yeah, that's right. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
So, yeah, it's just thinking of differences, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, there isn't. There is hunger, isn't it? It's need. Yeah.
It's not being abundant.
Yeah.
That means there's limitation on it, which is not really unfair.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
The abundance would be, there's no lack.
Yeah, there's no lack, exactly, yeah.
So
Whereas here we get a lack, and that's also maybe the relation, the difference between Fichte and Shelley, is maybe that there's this lack introduced, yeah. That's a good point, I think. We need to think about that. Spontaneity is so being a source, being a giving, being a quelle. Not a lack, but an abundance. And this gets limited, and that's then the finite being. Esse is in this sense spontaneity. So esse is pure spontaneity. And it's a perspective that also internally that resolves or that puts things in a different light. So for us, and I think you're very right. So for us, initially there's always something like, why is there something rather than nothing? This is where Heidegger puts it as well, and I like it too. Heidegger gets it from stuff. For the Thomist, the question, why is there something rather than nothing? Well, the answer to the question is because esse is act of being. It's sort of, that's first, that's basic. It's related to the logical argument that Raimi already mentioned, and which White refers to at the end of the book, indeed takes it almost literally from Thomas Aquinas. To say nothingness is a non-concept, and so there must be being, and that means there must be necessary being, because all finite beings can at one point not be.
That's what I found very interesting about that book. He kind of claims that it's necessary that there is being.
Yeah, exactly. That's that idea. That is, if I put it poetically, that's the abundance theory of being.
There can't not be being.
And that means that there must be necessary being, and that means because we are all not necessary, that there must be something.
That was Avicenna.
Yeah, exactly. And Thomas Aquinas, it's the third way in the five proofs of the existence of God for Aquinas. This is the third way. Yeah. So
it's interesting in mysticism. We've got this idea that there are beings which they don't exist. So, for example, before I existed, I did exist.
Yeah.
In God's mind. And Arab calls them the fixed entities, الأعيان الثابتة. He thinks الأعيان الثابتة is like monads before they can realize.
Yeah.
So there are beings, but they haven't got existence yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
لم تشم رائحة الوجود. It hasn't the smell the smell of existence, he says.
Yeah, beautiful, yeah, and that's, Thomas would, Aquinas would take that literally, would accept that literally, White goes further, following Punto, saying we can prove two things of this necessary being, that it has intellect and will. and then there we are, there we go into full-blown philosophical theology. Because if you can demonstrate that there is necessary being which has intellect and will, then you've got proof for the existence of God. And so there the problems come back in full force. Necessary being, Heidegger would say, doesn't mean a necessary being. Being is not the highest genus, means being, there isn't such a thing as a highest being. So for Heidegger, for that view of metaphysics, these speculations, insofar as they are couched in terms of a substance ontology, referring back to Aristotle, become a discourse about a highest, absolute, unlimited being, namely God. Because the substance ontology is still behind it. What happens when you let go of that substance ontology? What then happens of these fundamental ideas of necessary being with intellect and will? Can we even talk about that, or what? And what does it mean? Maybe then a philosophical theology doesn't look half as bewildering as it looks in when you take these ideas, which are all have to do with what I just called the second level of Aristotelian analysis, the metaphysical constitution of being, metaphysical structure of being. When you apply that to an Aristotelian categorical framework, then you get the problems. See, there is you can start to untangle these things. You can have the discourse of the metaphysical constitution of being without the categorical substance, the framework of categorical substance. Does that change how we talk about what necessary being is? Because with Aristotle, we have to say, once it's proven that there's necessary being, then that means there must be a necessary being. But that doesn't follow if we let go of the categorical framework, and we may have good reasons to let go of the categorical framework. And that may change the whole nature of the relation between the categories. So, there's a lot there that goes on. But I think what you can see, hopefully, or to try to indicate a little bit with this soliloquy, is that all these problems that we're thinking about so hard today in our own way, that they have this huge metaphysical history behind them, and that they don't come out of they don't fall from the sky. And it's nice to see, although I take your point that this is very dry and it's not the way we want to be going. Not the only way we want to be going. We can learn something from a kind of audacity with which Punto and White have said, okay, cut the crap, let's see what are we really talking about here? That's kind of the spirit that has been perverted completely in analytical philosophy to an empty scholastic ideological game. But here you find something of that. I've had this sort of moment of when I read the book, it came out last year, when I read this, I had this sort of moment of that I reminded me of reading Gilles Song as a student, reading these neo-existentialist Thomists and thinking, there's a real, that they really try to do something. They try to combine a kind of profundity with a rational discourse, and there is something deeply philosophical about that. That is what the philosophical tradition has been. And so it's interesting to see what they come up with, and to see if the way in which the problems are put here, if they help us or not. That's really the only thing we want to be doing. In order just to ask this question of being ourselves, and to expose ourselves to that question, and find out what, if anything, it might mean to do that. Heidegger is becoming very much, it's very problematic in his own way too, isn't it?
I think that's an important point, isn't it? When the question of being poses itself to us, a tradition also poses itself to us, whether we like it or not. Again, in some sense, the question of being doesn't fall from the sky either. It passes through to us from the flow of tradition.
Yeah, that's right.
And the Physical, is that how you say his name, has a good passage about tradition and so.
What does he say? What does he say?
He just says, I can't remember, it's quite a subtle thought, really, I can't remember what it was. But
You should try to look it up.
Yeah, well, I have the book with me.
Okay,
So,
well, maybe you can have a look, see if you can find it, A very good book, if you want to just read up on Thomist metaphysics, is, I think I put it on here as well. What did I? Yeah, this book is great, Bela Weismach Ontologie. Second edition, that's in German, if you can read, you can read it. Bela Weismach Ontologie, second edition, 1991. It's a textbook. It's on the website. Written by a Jesuit, a Hungarian Jesuit, Bela Weismach, who died a few years ago. He never really published much. This is his only book. I proposed one other book. And it is a textbook for his introductory course in ontology at the Hochschule für Philosophie, which is a Jesuit philosophy school in München. And it takes this point of being as being being is not a concept, and it is at once the most extensive and the most intensive notion, and develops that into a full theory of being in a really wonderful way. That's a really good book. But there's another book in English called The One and the Many. And it's by Norris Clark, an American philosopher who lived to be almost 100, and he died a few years ago. He wrote this really late in his life, in his 90s or so, and it's a kind of overview of existential Thomism from a systematic point of view. It's called The One and the Many, Norris Clark, and that's a really good book to just read. It's not difficult to read, it's also quite introductory. But once you've read it, you have got a very good understanding of the basics of Thomist metaphysics. I would definitely encourage you to read it. He also wrote a book called, where he gave a lecture, the Aquinas lecture, which is a very short, published as a short book, called Person and Being, I think. Yeah, I think it's called Person and Being. I will look it up. And there he develops this idea of a relational ontology. Because he takes the point that there is something to be gained by looking at relations as fundamental. And he builds on Urs von Balthasar, the Swiss Catholic theologian, who wrote a lot about the relationality of the Trinity and tried to secularize that idea and apply it to the sphere of human relations. secularize is too big a word, but he tried to expand the notion of the relationality of the Trinity to the relation between God and the world. And Noah's Clark takes that as sort of a starting point for trying to, what Dave Weissman in his own way also does, to try to bring in the idea of substantial relations, because Aquinas really wanted himself, but to try to say there's something in Aquinas that can be creatively developed to include that. So those are very good background texts to understand discussions that Punzel and White are also referring to. Now, what I want to just, because we're just a small group, that's fine. That's also why I, in a way, sent this so early on Monday morning. I wanted a small group. But my idea was to meet every week, so that we can really sort of make some systematic headway. But that means that I do want you to really participate in the sense of prepare the texts and also, lead the discussions. So it's going to be a little bit different from how it's been last year and the year before. And that's why I would like to ask you to get this book if you don't have it. But it's not only the text I'm going to talk about. He just sent me the presidential. He was the president of the American Metaphysical Association. He sent me his presidential address, which I will send to you, and I would like you to read it alongside the book. And then there are other texts that we will read, and basically I would like you to read the text, and then in the seminar we discuss it, and we try to, and I've selected the text in such a way that they can form the building blocks of our analysis of the question of being. So that's how I want to proceed with the seminar.
You want us to do a sort of presentation?
No, not presentation, and not like standing up and presenting, but that each week one of us leads us through the text, and it may also be nice learning for you. It doesn't matter if it doesn't go perfectly well, or
Are there not more than these? Are not any more people coming?
I don't think so.
Nobody else has.
No one has registered. No, some people said that they would like to come, but some people, many of the usual attendants, have written to me and said I can't do it on Monday morning. And it was a little bit I couldn't have the evening slot anyway, but I wanted something early in the morning, beginning of the week. So this is what it is. If you don't want to do it, it's fine. You don't have to.
No.
And the introduction to basic writings of Heidegger, David Krell says that Heidegger was given a course, I don't know which year, I think 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
7:30 in the morning.
Yeah. Kant also used to lecture at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, or even earlier.
And religious schools in Iraq, like what Najaf and Iran would say the same, and so on. They pray the morning prayer, which is before sunrise, and they stay for the class afterwards.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
They don't have their breakfast until they finish.
Until they finish the class, yeah, that would be good, yeah. And that's right, yeah, that's right. There was something else I thought of. It's better to get it out of the way.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that you know that we would read for this book today, because it is the third one on the list. So
Yeah. Have you got that?
I started.
Yeah, I wanted to.
I didn't find that.
No, he will come and visit us later in the year, Mr. White. No, I want to do this for next week. Yeah.
Can I buy this here in the shop?
Yeah, you can just order it online. Yeah, it's not expensive.
I don't want to buy online, I have some vouchers.
I ordered it from Blackwell's.
You can get it from Blackwood or from Waterstones. Yeah, so here I want to, this book, Sein und Gott, ein systematischer Ansatz in Auseinandersetzung mit heiligen Leben als Manion. Also, I mean, Puntel is even worse than White, the sort of the maniacal rationalism of it is in itself an interesting thing to think about. Because I do want to start with chapter 6 of this book.
Yeah, of which one?
Yeah, can I have it?
Oh, this one, chapter 6. That's the English version.
No. I mean, this is structure and being. Yeah. So this is our big book. Then this is what we will use. And it's good that you started to read it. That's excellent. But I was thinking of first of chapter 6 of Sein und Gott.
Chapter 6 for Sein und Gott.
Yeah, being in God.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is the chapter in which Puntel develops his critique of Heidegger's treatment of the question of being.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the first text, and then we go into that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to buy the book?
Well, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
It's too expensive.
So
Yeah.
are you going to get?
I'll see if I can make photocopies.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. That's probably the best thing to do. Yeah. Which I will email to everyone. Also, you have to fill this in this time.
Do I have to do this? You know everything.
Yes, but everybody has to fill it in and sign it,
Oh,
because
I see.
they become very
Okay.
strict about this.
I was thinking about buying this book in German, and I saw how it was on Amazon, the image of the book, and you also had it in your website somewhere. And but I wanted to buy it in the shop, and here in what is it didn't have this image, and so I thought it was a different.
Oh, I don't know about that.
And then it wouldn't be the same, and then if you said pen to page so and so, then I would not know. Then I had to find it in my book, and that wouldn't work.
I don't know if there's, I think there's only one version of it. Yeah, this one. This is it. But I'll give you a photocopy of chapter 6.
Yeah, this it looks like that.
Yeah, that's the one.
But you have something different. It looks different what you have on your.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to
It's
check
something
that.
blue,
But I think
light blue, and. Oh no,
Yeah,
no, I'm
no.
sorry. I'm not talking about being in God.
here, this
Structure and being. Yeah, that one.
is the.
But it looks different again now.
Yeah, this is the one. There's only one book like this.
That was the one. Aha.
And this is.
Being in God. Yeah.
This is being in God. Yeah. You don't have to buy it. That would be asking too much. I think it's. Thank you much. Yeah, you see, even here the cheapest one is £23.
With postage.
Huh?
And postage.
And postage the package, yeah. So I'll get you a photocopy. So we won't read that for next week. For next week, I will send you via email the presidential address, Alan White's presidential address. And we will start with a discussion of that.
Oh.
Yeah?
So I found the passage, the paragraph, I don't know if you want to just find it.
Yeah, can you read it out?
I can read it out. So obviously it's an extract from a whole chapter. So he goes, in this threefold way, history can become a positively conscious medium, but then as such, it must explicitly carry within itself the intentionality towards objective truth that the concept of medium implies. This means that the growing out of the original tradition, this being the first step along the path of the emphatically historical, is a genuine step of metaphysics only insofar as it is guided by this intentionality and hence is guided towards its fulfillment. Thus, in terms of method, it must proceed from an antecedent pure objective problematic towards a consequent pure objective solution. This relation is something ultimate. On the one hand, critical reflection upon the original tradition as the predominant a posteriori, how do you say that?
Posteriori.
Yeah, of the act cannot be prosecuted without an inner knowledge of the objective problems that lie at its foundation, nor without an orientation towards their evolving solution. On the other hand, a treatment of these objective questions, which for its part represents the predominant a priori of the act, will never actually be pure, but will rather be already intrinsically determined by the thinker's historical position with the entirety of the tradition in which he lives, even if he does not know it. Certainly truth, as what is beyond history, makes itself known always only in history, but it reveals itself in history as beyond history. So our formula must read truth in and beyond history. So it's just that he's talking about that kind of the tension between the question of being and how it's been posed throughout history, and how we kind of take that tradition upon ourselves, but in knowing that it's not something of history, perhaps. Or,
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know.
Yeah, see what you mean. But what do you think is the significance of that?
Well, it's just when we're thinking being, but his point is we're thinking in a certain historical position that has a tradition that we draw upon and rely upon to even begin to think the question.
Yeah.
But that history is not necessarily the question itself.
Exactly, yeah.
So
I think that is a key, very important point to say,
yeah,
because we very often think about these philosophical ideas and questions only through their historical mediation.
yeah,
But they're not. They're real questions.
That's what Heidegger was challenging as well. The traditional.
Well, no, that's not the point. Can you say it again?
It's that the question of being only comes to us from a historical tradition, but that the question of being is not reduced to that tradition, or it's like this guy says, it's the basic structure of his metaphysics. It's in and beyond. The question of being is found in the tradition, but it's also a question that's beyond the tradition, and that's exactly what constitutes the tradition in the first place.
Yeah.
Is that it's, yeah, so it's, I suppose we have to recognise that we've begun to answer the question that's being posed to us, but we can't be ignorant of the fact that there is a tradition, and while that tradition gets us off a starting point, we have to be careful about that tradition as well at the same time.
Yeah. And we have to see that that tradition in itself is a set of responses to this question.
Yeah.
So we also have to find our own way. That's why I said the only way to think about the question of being is to see that it is there for you.
But But that's what unites us.
And it is what unites us throughout history.
Yeah.
And that is why our relation to the previous thinkers who thought about it is not that of a hermeneutical relation or fusion of horizons, or maybe not even that, or is not that of not being able to understand the Greeks or something like that. The claim is that insofar as we're talking about the question of being, we can have a conversation with them.
Yeah, I don't think you can think the question of being if you're relatives.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
And so therefore this question becomes so interesting and important. And Aristotle, that's the nice thing about Aristotle, of course, always has more to offer than you think, or maybe not than you think. But he seems to be aware in the peculiar rhetoric almost of his formulation, when he says, and indeed the question which was raised of old and is raised now and always.
Yeah.
Of old and now and always. There you have this peculiar feeling of what is beyond history, what's in history and beyond history.
Yeah. And he says this about Aristotle, that again, Aristotle doesn't come to his conception of substance. It doesn't just begin with him. He talks about the Eleatics and Heraclitus, and he draws his own thing from a commentary on them. In the Metaphysics, he begins by talking about how other people have spoken.
Yeah, exactly.
So he, although we begin with him, and I suppose the question as it's formulated begins with him, he has a history as well.
Exactly. He has history as well. And in a way, what he goes on to say in the second half of the sentence, what being is just a question of what is substance. That's him.
Yeah.
That's so he says this question has always been there, and is there now, and will always be there. And this is what I say about it. That there's an original moment of thought, and something that we can link to, and that we can experience in our own thinking as an exposition to the question of being. So it's about how we think. It's about how I think. It's not about what some dude in history thought, or it's about what I think. Norris Clarke also begins with that in his One and Many, where he lists a number of key experiences that can trigger the question of being. Just as for Heidegger it was really Brentano, but there are other intense experiences that can bring this near to us. And also I put this on the list, also a book that nobody ever reads anymore. Gabriel Marcel, Le Mystère de l'Être, Mystery of Being. In which he makes a lot of this.
Which one is that?
Gabriel Marcel. He makes a lot of this of the notion of mystery, of course, and we'll get to that as well. But that's also a book that's very, very strong in the way it evokes at a phenomenological level the place that the question of being has in individual existence as our proleptic relation to an absolute. That was those were the Clifford lectures that Marcel gave in one was it 1949, 1950. Actually, I think it was in Glasgow. Or was it Edinburgh? Yeah, could have been, probably in Edinburgh. Whitehead also gave Process and Reality, but also the Gifford lectures in Edinburgh, 1926 or something.
And William James.
And William James tried to bring experience, also Edinburgh lectures. Yeah.
Iris Murdoch did that.
Iris Murdoch Guide to Metaphysics. Metaphysics Guide to Morals, also Gifford lectures, so they're very important. But Whitehead's Gifford lectures, The Process and Reality, is a key book I think. Hopefully we get some day we will be able to study that. And Alan White talks a lot about Whitehead. He makes very fundamental points in the presidential address, which we'll talk about next week. But Whitehead's gifford lectures are a good example of the kind of thing we do now, because it started out, of course, the first Whitehead was very famous in those days. First lecture, full auditorium, and then it dwindled very quickly to 2 people. So most of these lectures were delivered for 2 people.
There was a philosopher, McMurray, who was at London University, I think he was at UCLAN in the 30s, and he's saturated with German ideas, but he developed his own ideas, and he gave these lectures as well, and we spent 2 years reading this book. I don't know how people understood it in a few lectures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. The same with process and reality. How you can, I mean, I've spent years studying process and reality. How you can listen to that as a lecture and then think, oh yeah, right, beyond me. But yeah. No, okay, so that's good. I mean, thanks, Nathaniel, for making that point. That really helps to put this into perspective. This is a big journey that we are undertaking. But I hope that we will get out of it with a better understanding of what it means to think being, that we will get out of it with a better understanding of how this question of being has structured the history of German philosophy in particular, so that will be a concern. And also that we learn to appreciate something of the question of theoreticity and systematicity in philosophy. What the nature of it is, how far it goes, why it's important or not important, and that has to do with questions of what does it mean to philosophize. So my mantra at the moment is philosophy is always more than that. So when somebody says something to me about philosophy, I say philosophy is always more than that. And I partly to free myself from kind of narrow limited view of what philosophy is or might be or might not be. But that doesn't mean that we do not have to ask ourselves, well, what is that more than? What is it? And that's what we'll do. We'll stop now, because I think we've done enough for today.